We'll get started in a minute, everybody, when people have a chance to enter the workshop. Okay, let's get started, and people can join us as they do. So welcome, everybody. This is the 12th of 13 workshops in the Seattle MLK Coalition's annual community workshop series. In this workshop, we're going to hear from a poet and activist, a scribe called Quess, as he connects with activist poets and communities from Oakland to New Orleans. So Quess and the director of the film that they put together, Many Fires This Time, We the 100 Million, will discuss the making of the film and its portrayal of everyday people who are fighting for equality and justice. Before I introduce you to Quess and Jason, a couple of housekeeping details. First of all, for people who are visually impaired, I am a white woman with curly gray hair and black frame glasses. I'm sitting in my home office in West Seattle. So we have live captioning for this workshop, and you can find it down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Look for CC and live transcript. If you click on that button, you'll be able to access captioning. In terms of the chat, the panelists will see what you put in the chat, but you will not see what other attendees post in the chat. After our presentation, we'll have Q&A with Quess and Jason, and we will close at 1 o'clock. So now I want to turn it over to poet and activist Quess to take it away from here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Quess, aka Michael Quess Moore, Scribe Called Quess. You could just think of me, refer to me as Quess. I'm a poet, I'm a educator, I'm an organizer in New Orleans, Louisiana, man of many hats. Yeah, my poetry leads me to all the other aforementioned disciplines, but it's my first and foremost passion. It forms everything else that I do. I will, for the visually impaired, just briefly describe myself. I'm a Black African-American man, dark brown skin, long locks about down to my chest. Got a little sock hat on top of them. I'm sitting in my dining room in my home. Got on a white t-shirt with E.T. and Elliot on it. Shouts out to the 80s babies. That's about it in a nutshell. And we'll talk a lot more about my work as it pertains to this film, Many Fires This Time, We the 100 Million. And we'll also do a land acknowledgement in just a second and just give it up for the Native Indigenous ancestors upon whose lands we sit and stand right now. But I'm going to keep it brief for now. I'm going to just pass it off to my my director, Jason, co-producer on this film. I'll let him introduce himself and then we'll get into everything.
Thank you, Quess. My name is Jason Foster. I'm also in New Orleans. I'm sitting in my home office. I'm a light-skinned Black man, freckles, red hair, some semblance of a beard. I don't know what else. I'm 6'4". I got 2 kids and a wife. I'm a director, photographer, sometimes actor. Most of my work centers around people or groups who have been disenfranchised, looked over, or have not had the proper platform to really speak their truth. So this documentary, Many Fires This Time, really checks a lot of those boxes, if not all, and then some more. So yeah, looking forward to discussing more about the film with you all, and thanks for being here. Katie, I'll give it back to you.
Um, it would be great if you could begin by talking about what the impetus was for your doing the film.
I want to make sure we do the land acknowledgement first,
Oh,
Katie.
okay. Let's start with that.
All righty. So since we happen to be down here in the bayou, I'm going to go ahead and do a land acknowledgement for the place colonially known as New Orleans, named after the Duke Orleans, who never even set foot on this sacred ground. So instead, we rather give thanks for the Atacapa, the Chitimacha, the Caddo, the Choctaw, the Houma, the Natchez, and the Tunica people, and the many other stewards, at least 30 different known of groups who are stewards of this 3,000-year-old land called Bubancha, which means land of many tongues in Choctaw, who I like to say personally showed up in my great grandma's cheekbones and her mama's cheekbones and half her grandma's blood. So Ashio Mafedi Funfi Gungun highest reverence to our native indigenous ancestors, as well as our African ancestors who were stolen and like I just mentioned or alluded to, quite often mixed in and became one literal family and one literal body with these native ancestors, of which I am a descendant, a proud descendant, I say. So yes, land acknowledgement for Bubancha. Katie, if you want to do it for your region.
We're sitting on the land of the Coast Salish people who have occupied this land since time immemorial. We acknowledge their presence. We take pains to ensure that we treat the land respectfully. And now I'm going to turn it back over to you to describe the impetus for your making the film and how you began, what it was that you hoped to achieve in putting the film together.
Yeah, so Many Fires This Time, We the 100 Million, started off as a poetic theater project. That's what it was originally going to be, not a film. It was going to be a work of quasi-devised theater, basically. And devised theater is when you bring many different voices to the table, actors, choreographers, poets, what have you. And we all combine, videographers for that matter, and we all combine our skills and talents to create one piece. And quite often we all write to it, we all create for it, what have you. And so I was recruited by a guy named Jeremy Lou, who worked for a nonprofit in Oakland, not too far from y'all, out there in Seattle. And the nonprofit's called Policy Link. At the time, he worked for them, and he was looking for a way to artistically represent one of their missions, which was kind of like their mission statement at the time, which is We the 100 Million. And they were acknowledging that, you know, there are at least 100 million people in this country at the time. This is about 2-3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now. But they were acknowledging that there were 100 million people in the country at the time who were living in economic insecurity, who were living check to check, who basically, you know, couldn't necessarily stand on, you know, confident ground financially. And so that was what they were trying to highlight then. And they were trying to, what was implicit in that conversation was also acknowledging the intersectionality that was naturally in there, because this is an economic circumstance that regardless of the racial divides in this country, gender divides, you know, sexual orientation, what have you, you're going to have people across the board that apply to that 100 million, even people who have been conditioned and, you know, programmed to be at each other's necks. You know what I'm saying? So we talk about that number at the time, we were talking about at least 50 million, even working class white folks. The other 50 million was mostly made up of Black and brown folks in this country. And so that was their framework. And ultimately they wanted to create a work of art that bound people together through story and showed how different people are struggling through this economic precarity and what their stories look like in different facets of life in today's society, whether that be struggles with state-sanctioned violence through police brutality, which is obviously and has on everybody's mind and has been for the last 7 years at least. And if you're in the Black community all your life, struggles against housing insecurity, gentrification, migrant issues, especially in the Latinx community, caretaking really in all communities, but we chose to focus particularly on the Appalachian community in our movie or in our work. And so these were all different issues that we wanted to address, right? This is what Policy Link was trying to do. They were recommended me by way of a brother named Carlton Turner, who was a mutual friend of Jason and I's, and he comes from that world of devised theater that I referenced before. So I've done projects not directly with him, but actually I got introduced to devised theater by the same outfit that he used to participate in. And so when I saw years ago, like over a decade ago, a flyer with him on it and some really prominent artists in New Orleans that I look up to, I was like, wow, what's that? I want to be a part of that. And so I went and participated, and just so happens it was with an outfit called Junebug Productions, which grows out of an outfit called Free Southern Theater. I'm giving y'all a long story, the short story long. But that's literally how I got involved in community theater. And eventually I would meet Jason through that because his wife, who wasn't his wife at the time when I met her, but his wife was one of the heads of Junebug Productions. And ultimately, when we did a play called Lockdown, it was about education or miseducation in New Orleans. Jason did the videography for that. And so we shared community, and a lot of the people that you see show up or don't necessarily even show up, but they contribute to this work are people that we know from that community. Shouts out to Jeremy Guyton, amazing dancer in the movie. If y'all liked any of the movement y'all saw, he's somebody that we know through that community. Free Pharaoh, who you will not see, but you will hear and feel all throughout the film because they scored it musically. We know them through that community. And we've all done different projects together throughout the year. So when they tapped me by way of Carlton, I tapped all of these other people, and we decided that we would, put our heads together and make that magic happen again. And so that was that. And then I tapped a few poets that I knew in other cities that I thought could be really great to represent the voices of the people who are already doing that. So people like K Love in Chicago, who I met almost a decade ago. She's like the queen of the South Side, everybody knows her. And then a brilliant poet and organizer. And so she represented for Chicago. My guy Tango in the Bay, met him over a decade ago. And he's like the poet laureate of San Francisco right now. So clearly the voice, and, tapped him to represent for them. And then we just had a couple of overlaps with the other two poets, Deanna from Tijuana, Mexico. I knew her already, but Policy Link happened to know her. They pulled her in. I was like, oh, that's my homegirl. And then, boom, she represented for the Latinx community. And Misty was another Policy Link Connect. And she represented as one of the premier poets in Letcher County in the Holler, as they call it out there in Kentucky. So all those different forces came together. I envisioned how we would put it together would be through some of the same pedagogy and methodology that we use through Junebug Productions, which was doing workshops, doing story circles, getting people to sit down and, chop it up, talk about the issues, break bread together, eat, get some political education about the issues. And then from that, have discussion and, do movement and all of that, and just build community for a day. And the poet would be in that room and be steeped in that. And then from that, they would create. And then when they created, they would send what they created back to Jason, and Jason worked his magic from there. So short story long, that's how we came into this.
Jason, do you have anything you want to talk about in terms of your impetus for participating in this project?
Yeah, I think Quess covered a lot. Uh, yeah, so like Quest said, this was um, originated before the pandemic. So once the pandemic hit and we knew it was a pandemic, we made the pivot to making it a theater piece into like, hey, can we make this into a film? So originally I was filming, but it wasn't filmed with the intent to make it a feature-length film. So it's kind of accidental that we came upon it. But what I did film was supposed to be like little trailers that were gonna play behind each poet that went up on stage. So so behind Quest, you would have seen scenes in New Orleans. Behind Misty, you would have seen scenes of Kentucky and the workshop footage and so forth and so on. Once we made that call to make it a feature-length film, we had to kind of go back to the drawing board as far as like, well, how do we flesh this out? How do we even get these poets who live all across the country? How do we get their poems filmed? Who do we connect with? So it was this film has a lot to do with community and the strength in one's community. So this was kind of like a microcosm of that, but with the film community across the country. So each poet really reached out to folks that they knew and they recorded them in their respective cities. So, and I think, I didn't know any of them, and I didn't know their work. I didn't know how well they could hold a camera or tell a story. But if you saw the film and when you watch the film, you'll see that all the footage that they turned in was great. And then we, in turn, in New Orleans, I filmed all of Quest's pieces down here. So we did that in New Orleans, but we also filmed the B-roll sections of the actors in each poem. So that was to flesh out each poem, to have it, to kind of put a narrative to it a little bit, to have proxies for each city be in each poem. So we basically casted actors to be in each poem from each city, so we can make this through line throughout the documentary. So it didn't seem so disparate. Trying to think what else. Yeah, I think from when we made the call to make it to a film and to when we finished or premiered, it was like 13 months. Quest, was it? So
Yeah,
March 2020 to April 2021. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. I don't know. It was a lot. It's my first feature film. Like I said, it was accidental, but as if you work in the arts or if you work in some type of medium like this, the film or the art tells you what it wants to be. So as we were going through the process, we were trying different things out. Do we put data points in there? Do we not put data points in there? Well, actually, that was pretty intentional. We didn't want to quote unquote spoon feed the audience. We wanted you to listen to the poets, take in the workshop exercises, and really be engaged into in the film. So, and hopefully you could do some of that work yourself. And maybe some things will be illuminated for you that you heard of, but you really didn't connect with in a meaningful way. So that was the underlying intent. I mean, there was a lot of intent behind the film, but I think one of the main thing we wanted to get across was we want people to engage with this and not check out for 5 seconds if a text card comes up with data points on New Orleans or Kentucky or et cetera.
We have a couple of questions. One is, how many story circles were you able to do and where did you do them? Because only a few were represented in the film.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Janet. I see you. Thank you for putting this helping us put this together. I'll say the story circles were in every city we went to. And once the pandemic hit and we couldn't go to cities anymore, I would conduct them right here on Zoom. And so, let me see. Oakland for sure. We went to Oakland for two. We did two workshops out there. One was on housing, the other one was on migrant issues. And those are really powerful, especially the one with the migrant women. With an organization called Mujeres Unidas, Mujeres Activas Unidas. I might have it out of order. Mujeres Unidas Activas.
MUA. Yeah.
UA is the acronym, yeah. But an all woman, Women United in Activism, basically in English, an all woman outfit, and a lot of them still literally going through those, border issues. The day of the workshop, you know what I'm saying? Like having to come late or having to leave early because they had somebody that they were trying to get in, or somebody, a family member they had to tend to, things of this nature. And that was really pungent. And it was like hard to keep dry faces in that room. It was really powerful. And so that was one. Housing was two. And this is not in chronological order. Chicago was really beautiful and powerful. About 40 folks in the room. K Love and a brother named Fatal, who, she's the queen of the South Side. He's like the mayor of Inglewood, as they call him. And both of them, one a poet, one a rapper, both great organizers. They brought in like 50% of that room each. And a lot of their youth, they both are big, great youth workers, and they brought a lot of their youth to that room. So that was a multi-generational room spanned, ages from like at least 14 to like, 60 something. And so, in all Black room, all talking about issues of just really horrific police brutality in Chicago and breaking it down, which of course, that's unfortunately one of the meccas of that. So those three, Kentucky was really powerful. Me and Jace were the only Black people in that room. And we talked about caretaking in there, and, we still find a lot of overlaps because of, caretaking for them is really it's an umbrella term for any community in terms of what is helping you or stopping you take care of your people, and for them, it was big pharma, it was big coal, it was, mountaintop removal, it was the opioid crisis, which is connected to both because big pharma comes on the heels of big coal being moved out during the Obama administration, big pharma coming in, and a lot of people being displaced, from their work situations that have been in their families for decades. And what do? They self-medicate with some of the, spillover from the pharmaceutical industry, hence the opioid crisis. And so that related in a lot of ways to New Orleans, because where they have mountaintops being removed, our wetlands are being removed by big petrochem, some of which I know Seattle can relate to, because again, shouts out to Janet. She brought me to Seattle literally 2 months before the pandemic hit, for this MLK weekend and week. And I did like 15 different spots out there. You have an amazing, beautiful, powerful community out there. I must give much props and love to. And I had a ball when I was out there. And only 2 months later, everything got shut down. But I say all that to say, I got a little insights into some of the stuff y'all did with big tech. You know what I mean? The pollution of the lands out there, right? And so these are the things that came up in story circles. Again, short story long. Oakland twice, Chicago once, Kentucky. That's all the places we went to. Pandemic got so crazy that I couldn't even do a workshop in New Orleans, and I ended up doing Zoom with just some of my friends here. And, we just did it online, and that was 5. And then we also addressed LGBTQ issues, which was mostly folks from the Bay, poets from the Bay, especially that I knew. And so I did condensed versions of the story circles with them. That's some of what you saw at the end of the movie. So that was 6. I did 6 total. And then the one on water, which was the poem I did. Oh, by the way, the one I did with the folks in New Orleans were all educators, as you saw also. So that's why you see at the halfway point of the movie, it starts to become like a lot of Zoom interviews. You were still seeing story circles that are byproducts of them. They just happened digitally. So New Orleans and LGBTQ issues towards the end were all digital. What you saw before that, Kentucky, Chi-Town, both Oakland workshops, you did see like snippets of that, you know what I'm saying? And the day wasn't just story circle, it was also poetry that came from it. There was also movement. So some places like Kentucky, you saw more of the movement. We made a whole, Jason made a whole beautiful montage between he and Jeremy's work to like compliment, because Jeremy was like, we'll talk more about that when we talk about Jeremy, but he was recreating what he saw them do in the workshop through his movement. So it was a variety of things you saw showing up. The stories like was happening in every spot. Except the last one I meant to mention was water issues. I never met or talked to anybody about those directly. Policy Link did a plenary, and I just studied the things they were talking about in that plenary. And this sister, Dana, I believe, from, I think it was Arizona. No, I think she was from Midwest. I can't remember exactly where, but she, that was taken from the plenary once again. So it looks just like a story circle. It's the same type of dynamic, but her talk was not to me. I never talked to her directly. It was directly from the plenary.
We have two questions asking if you could talk a little about the dancer.
Sure. Jason has some powerful insights on this one just because he was with him. They did the movement together. I'll just say my background knowledge of Jeremy, and I love to know from the person who asked the question what their interest is, or like why that came up for them, because he is striking. He is like, you know, a force you can't deny when you see him in movement. And I'm interested in what he did for people in terms of their experience of the film, because I knew from jump I wanted to work with him, because at the time it was going to be live theater. And what I could imagine was like, I'm doing a poem and he's dancing it out, you know, and he and I have done that kind of work in prior projects. And so I knew the power of his movement. He's like one of those people that can really embody spirit and embody a story with his body and make it come to life. And dance has always been an abstract form to me that I was a late bloomer to even appreciate. I never really understood what the hell they were doing. I didn't really necessarily like it, but I got introduced to it by way of the urban bushwomen of Brooklyn who used to come down to New Orleans, who were also a community with us. And they were the ones who first gave me like some dance literacy to understand like, oh, this is what's going on. Or they are up here like bringing ancestors through and telling the story of, you know, displacement, slavery, whatever the case was, gentrification. They could do it with their bodies. And so when they gave me the literacy for that, I was able to like look at people like Jeremy and say, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. Oh man, wow. And then sometimes like, oh my God, you know, powerful. And so I wanted him to lend that to this, and he did not fail. He delivered. Oh my God. Like to me, the essence of the movie is him running through that factory. That's everything. And then between Jason and David Bear, shout out to David, they're genius. I don't know who came up with the idea of having it reverse the footage and have him run backwards. Oh my God, crazy.
Yeah, I could talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Jeremy, I mean, yeah, Quess and I have known him for years. And honestly, I mean, this whole project, all the creatives, they're directors in their own right. You know, maybe not listed on the film, but everybody knows what they're doing and can do it at a high level. And Jeremy's no different. So he really came. We presented the idea to him. I sent him the Kentucky footage as far as the workshop. What is it? Was that the Theater of the Oppressed exercise? The mirrors where they were doing. Anyway, yeah. So I showed him that, and it was his idea. He kind of took their movements and interpreted them into a dance, a choreography. The warehouse, he had an idea. That was all his idea to like, it's like, I want the camera to go around me and I'm gonna have these things I'm gonna be doing and, you know, have these props and this, that, and the third. I was like, yeah, cool. I didn't know how we were gonna do it, but I was like, yeah, all right, cool. We'll figure it out. So David, who was the assistant editor on this, assistant director, and just overall my business partner, he had access to a warehouse. He had a truck, put the camera in the bed of the truck, and we just rolled around, just circled around Jeremy as he was doing his movements. So it all came together pretty organically. There's a lot of trust involved, but there's also a shorthand because the whole crew had worked with one another, so it wasn't a lot of guesswork or like there was a lot of trust there, so it came pretty easily. Yeah, Jeremy, I mean, I just worked with him again on a music video. He did some choreography on that, and he just gets it. Yeah, he's a force.
So related to that, someone is asking how much of his choreography just came organically from him and how much was directed.
That was all him. That was all him. So it was more like, and we talked about it before. You know, we talked through the process of what he was thinking and what his interpretation of the footage that he was seeing and the words and the music, how he felt about it. But it was, yeah, I didn't give him any direction. I wasn't saying, can you put your foot here or can you do that? It was more, let's see your movement and let's figure out where to put the camera, you know? So it was really a conversation between me and Zach Manuel, who was one of the cinematographers in New Orleans. Spencer Mann was also a cinematographer, but he was working on the actual film part of it. So we shot Super 8 footage, 16 millimeter film stills, and then digital footage. So yeah, yeah, it was just a matter of let's see what you got, and let's move the camera to best accentuate what you're doing.
Mhm. So we have a question that I wanted to ask you about as well. How has participating in the story circles impacted the lives of the people who participated?
It's a good question. Let me just double back to the Jeremy question real quick before I jump into that one, because I have one more thing on that, and this one is actually a little harder. I will say, in case that person was asking how he responded to the embodiment of my pieces, I wasn't so lucky on this project. I don't think he actually did any to embody my pieces, but the one that's my favorite is when he embodied Tango's piece in the factory. So when he's running through that factory backwards, again, all his calls, but again, it's just like Tango is already such an abstract poet, and then Jeremy Dance Period is abstract, that like he was really just embodying the message of it however he felt best. And in some cases, it feels like it's very on the nose direct, like, Tango mentions a cigarette, he's smoking a cigarette. Tango mentions, drinking, alcoholism, drinking through whatever, and you see him with the bottle. But then there's like these really subtle levels to it where like Tango is definitely talking about the as much as he's an abstract poet, I also understand his politics to some extent. And I understand a little bit of how they come through. So when he says things about a classless society and about, living beyond the present moment and get into a place where, things are run by the people, what have you, and yet tracking through our history of state sanctioned violence where we're constantly, at the whim of police violence. And, Ayanna Jones baked in a room temperature is a cue to cook Brooklyn. It's one of the most powerful lines in the movie to me. Like, that's not his assignment to talk about state violence. He's talking about housing there, but he's also talking about, how all of these are different forms of violence, in my opinion. And to me, that line is kind of saying, when we can normalize the murder of Black bodies to the point that a child's murder is just a part of the room temperature, that's cue to turn the temperature up and cook the city, destroy it. You know what I mean? And for Jeremy to be running backwards to a factory is like him running through the modern iteration of slavery, which is wage slavery through a factory. And yet we've always been running from a plantation of some sort. And for him to be doing it backwards is showing how cyclical this thing is, how we never really escape, you know what I mean? And to be naked running like that, you know what I mean? Like literally stripped of everything, literally debased and, into chattel, inhumane condition, and running from that with the most vehement determination. You can see it in his eyes, right? And just the fight in that is just so powerful. So I think he embodied that like nobody's business, and I can't even give it justice in this short explanation. It's worthy of its own like dissertation. What the hell happened there? But the others where he was embodying Kentucky's workshop, and he was embodying I can't remember the last one. Oh, Chicago's workshop, and I thought he did that brilliantly too. His face up against a screen. It looked like somebody being detained by the police. Things like this. So, all right. Anyway, brilliant. What I say about the story circles, it's hard to gauge because unfortunately, like it's really hard to stay in touch with all the communities after it's said and done. The ripple effects, I can't speak beyond that date. I know that the day of, again, the best case study was Oakland, dealing with the migrant issues out there. The Oakland workshop a few days later on housing, and when the Tonga represented, that was really powerful. People really coming to a level of just like vulnerability and emotion, you know what I mean? Like people were really like, there wasn't, neither one of those workshops that we get through without, some tears and some people really going there. But I'll say that's one end of the spectrum. And I think for me, the migrant one was the most powerful personally, because I was like, wow, like I said in the movie, I have, comrades in this city who have been telling me about this issue for years, who are Latinx themselves in some cases. Shouts out to Jose Torres Tomas specifically, who is the reason I know Deanna in the first place, who has been embodying these stories literally for years. And it was one thing to see him talk about it, hear him talk about it, to see the people he was representing speak. And I worked with some of those people directly in my own city for years, but I've worked with them on the front lines. You know what I mean? Like we're at rallies together, we're talking, vehement fight back type of conversation. But to see folks who experienced that in a very vulnerable space, telling the story of like, yo, this is what it was for me inside of this concentration camp. They call them detention centers, but they're modern day concentration camps. You turn up the volume of the temperature bad enough, and it's no different from Auschwitz. And so the reality of those stories was just like so pungent and so heavy, like it just like really punched through the room. And I never felt it in a way that I felt it there. You don't want to like overly traumatize or trauma porn, what have you. And so a lot of that didn't make the movie, but it definitely made a move on my spirit and everybody in the room. And some of the byproduct is when we see the sister at the end, I can't remember how to say her name, Damaris or something like that. She spoke to it so brilliantly. You know what I mean? Like there's different ways to respond to these prompts. Some were very personal stories, but for her, she just gave a political breakdown. Look, this is what it is. We are coming to your country because you trashed our country. Mm-hmm. All right, you stop trashing our country, we won't leave our country. Like nobody wants to leave their family. We're coming here to, make enough money to send back to our families and provide for them, because American imperialism has moved into our back and front yards and made a mess of it to the point where we don't have livable circumstances anymore. We don't have livable wages. We don't have livable, reality. So we have to go somewhere else to survive. And so, I don't think if we call Malcolm from the grave, or Martin from the grave, speaking of, that they would have said it any clear that Damaris said it that day, as somebody who, experienced it. So from the personal, emotional to the political breakdowns to even action-oriented stuff, going to Chicago. I mean, some of those same women, I was in Oakland, and International Worker Women's Day was like 2 days after the workshop. And I got to go to the march and see that same sister who was, very vulnerable, heavily emoting. I think her name was some with a J. I'm bad with names. I haven't looked at the film in a minute, so pardon me. But yeah, she was the one talking about being in there with her daughter and couldn't move and people having breakdowns. She was at an action 2-3 days later on a bullhorn tearing it up. You know what I'm saying? So those communities you went to, we didn't have anything to give them in terms of like what they should be doing. They're already doing it. You know what I'm saying? We just wanted those stories to be connected with each other. When I went to Chi-Town, it got to the level of, people in the room giving game. Like, look, this is what we did to indict these police, to get them caught when they tried to get us caught up in entrapment. And it just so happened that the sister who gave the breakdown on that, I was familiar with her strategy because I had seen it on Twitter a couple of years ago. And what happened in Chicago was they went into the hood with a truck full of Nikes. So disgusting, so loathsome, so base and criminal. But the police went into the hood with a truck full of Nikes wide open to try to entrap Black youth in the hopes that they would steal those shoes and they could lock them up. Now, Chi-Town PD has not already, qualified itself as some of the biggest criminals on the planet time and time again. That was just another affirmation that that's the case. And it was so loathsome. It's like you want to indict everybody from the mayor on down who has something to do with that, because these are the same cops who killed Laquan McDonald and hid the tape for a year. So you find a way to hide tapes when you murder us. But when you do stuff like this, that is just straight up gaslighting, entrapment, right? It wouldn't have been recorded except for the sister who happened to be there. And she recorded it, put it on Twitter. And I remember that happening during the height of a lot of BLM activity in 16 or so. And, she gave it to us as like, look, this is something I did, it worked. We don't have to just, spill our stories about the blues or like what they've done to us, but we can also catch them in the act and use their surveillance technology against them. So some of them almost turn into organizing moments in the actual workshop. And that's just Oakland, and that's two workshops I could give, a little shouts out to for that.
The woman who was talking about the experience of being in the icebox in the process of entering the United States really struck home for me. I have found that that's a very common experience for people who are coming into the United States. And one of the things in the related poem that a line that really stuck with me was, a border is the liminal space between two nations where the distinction between freedom and oppression is unclear. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, Deanna is a quiet storm, yo. And that poem, you get caught up in a lot of different aspects of the filmmaking when you're doing this process. So we got caught up in a lot of the aesthetical qualities of that because we had to get the sound quality right. We had to get a shot a few different times. So it was a slow build for me to realize the things she was saying. Also, Deanna's a brilliant guitarist and songstress. So I'm not used to hearing all of her verbiage fleshed out like that, much less, as long a piece as that was. There were many gems in that one, but that one right there, the liminal space between, you memorized that, you wrote it down?
I wrote it down.
Can you say it again, please?
Yeah. A border is the liminal space between two nations where the distinction between freedom and oppression is unclear. It also strikes me that that applies to neighborhoods, as you were describing the police coming into this neighborhood with the Nikes.
Yes, wonderful. All lines. I'm so glad you said neighborhoods, because in New Orleans right now, we're dealing with them trying to basically transpose some Texas-esque gerrymandering into one of our crucial voting districts. I can't remember the exact district, but I know one of my organizer friends who's featured in it is a part of a coalition called Erase the Board. And her comrade is the one who tapped me on it, but I've been hearing about it anyway. But the point being, borders are colonial scars. Borders are scars of capitalism. A lot of what Tango was getting at in his poetry, again, these overlaps is a lot of what I felt like Deanna is knocking on the door, which is like, this is going to be a scar against us until it's no longer, until it's an actual democracy, which the world has never actually known. And that, people actually determine where we live and how we live, and our migration patterns are according to our needs and how we can accommodate what each other need. But until that's the case, it's a bank that decided that. It's a bank that directly or indirectly told a corporation how much they could have, who told the government how they needed them to move, and said, okay, the line goes here, and if it's not a bank, it's the military itself, but it's always in service of money interest. And so, which says that liminal space, out of Google liminal, but it sounds like temporal or transitory or something like that. But it's a beautiful line, and it really gets at it, because freedom and oppression is unclear. because you're sold the myth of freedom, but the oppression is what's actually happening. And so the oppression is clear because it is a colonial scar. But you keep remembering what Fievel told you, and I forgot the name of the little cartoon we watched when we were 5 years old. American Dream or whatever, right? Like you thinking that the streets are made of cheese. There are no cats in America. You think you can live good over here, and that's the propaganda they sell you. And then when you get here, it's a trap. It's a rat trap. You know what I'm saying? They look at you as the rat, and you're going to be the one that gets put inside of a concentration camp, or if your ancestors were stolen and they violated your borders to bring you over here to do free labor, then they're going to treat your whole community as a prison, right? Your whole community is an open air prison. Is, we'll violate those borders when it's convenient for us. We'll come in and say freedom happens now in the name of white hipsters, gentrification, but God forbid we could actually smoke weed freely before you legalized it and let, some venture capitalist come in here and set up his little shop. So I'm just going a lot of places with that, but that's where that takes me. It's like, borders are clearly the establishment and the imagination of the ruling class at work. They carve it up how they want to, when and where they want to. And then, word to what's going on in New Orleans right now, when they want to erase it and reconfigure it so that they can manipulate votes, or so that they can funnel in a new class to gentrify the neighborhood, they'll do that. And so that's the myth of freedom happening, but the reality is oppression all the time for Black and brown people. So, yeah.
Have the people who participated in the story circles had the opportunity to see the film?
Yes, we invited them to the original launch back last April, about 8 months ago. And they were present for that. As many as I know. I mean, we kind of work through our poets and our organizers to invite them in. And so I know that at least some of them made it for that. But we haven't had the chance. Go ahead.
So MUA definitely watched it. I think we had a version that was Spanish subtitled, so they got to watch that along with the live premiere of it, which was, I think, April 24th, 2021. Yeah.
Are there,
Chicago, yeah.
Are there specific follow-up plans? How is the film being used to promote story circles or to build community? And how are you using it, and how are others using it?
So we have a desire to still playing within the capitalist system to try to get it to as many people as possible, and hopefully get it hitched to, a place where it will have huge reach like that. Otherwise, that's going to be completely incumbent on me and Jason, who are, still everyday working folks. We still got to go out there and go to work every day. And it'd be incumbent on us to do all the promo ourselves. So right now, our promo is happening through Film Fest. We've been in 10. We just got accepted into our 11th. We've been in 9. We've been accepted to 11 now. We got a couple of pretty cool awards for it. Shouts out to Tallgrass Film Fest in Kansas. They awarded us, we were honorees as second runner-ups to the Gordon Parks Black Excellence Filmmaker Award. And that was pretty cool because, of course, he cast a big shadow, inspiration for both of us. And we won 2 awards in New Orleans Film Fest. And so that was great too, to be embraced coming back home. This is just part of the trajectory of the machine of the film world that Jason knows better than me, but any of us, and we're working through that right now. We wanted to give it a year run and hopefully get hitched to something to make it even more accessible to a lot more people. Because yes, we want to continue to work with community on a case-by-case basis. We also want, it's for the 100 million, right? We want millions to be able to access this. So what we're gonna do is, we've done case-by-case things. I would love to come out to Seattle, Jada, so if that's what you're getting at, hell yeah. But we're going to Kansas next month, for example, because of our interaction with them, the organizers called us back and they want us to do a screening with their with their young people to college out there. So we want to do it like that. And yet at the same time, because of the politics of the film world, we have to, you know, go through these film fests first to get to.
If I could add to that, so the college we're going to is Fort Scott Community College. So Fort Scott is where Gordon Parks is from, and the Gordon Parks Museum is going to be hosting us next month to screen the film for the community. And Tallgrass, which is also in Kansas, in Wichita, they want to have us out to do a screening at this restored theater, I think in June of this year, at the Dunbar Theater, which was in a historically Black community. The theater was up for a number of years. The building went to disrepair, and recently they got a grant, or they got some money, like $2.2 million to revitalize the theater. So so yeah, we'll be there. We have like we have a date out in Durham sometime in April. We recently got into another film fest in California, so stay tuned for that. If you want to keep in touch with us, we have a website, manyfiresfilm.com.
Can you put that in the chat, Jason? And I wanted to ask how people can support your work. So if you could describe kind of the different ways in which support would be helpful. I think that would be very useful for people who are attending this.
Right now, I mean, we have all the social media, well, not all, Instagram and Twitter. You can follow us on those. The links are on the website. Share with your people. Like if you were inspired by this, please post about it. Use the hashtag #ManyFiresFilm, because they can follow us through the website and they'll be able to watch it online when it comes to the next film fest in California, San Diego, as well as the one in Durham. So those might be the last two we're in, and after that, we just got to cross our fingers. Of course, the whole point of doing it this way is so that we can get larger distribution and awareness around it. But if that doesn't work, then it's gonna come right back to the people. And it's a matter of like how we get enough critical mass of people to say, you know, this is powerful. I stand by this. You should watch this. And that is not fleshed out yet. We don't know exactly what that looks like. This is my first rodeo. Might be Jason's too, to some extent.
Yeah, definitely on this scale. I mean, we're definitely open to going to colleges, you know, having that in the education system somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things we talked about before the film was even finished, is how do we get this in front of the community.
Yeah.
That's not the film fest, because that has its own tier of, you know, barriers. A lot of people don't know about it, or if it's really expensive, or some film fests have timed windows to where you can't watch the film unless it's between these hours on this specific day. So, you know, there are a lot of factors that contribute to folks not being able to see a film. So if we can get this film in front of the community members, much like we focused on in the film, that would be a huge win for the film.
Yeah.
What
Which,
about, I'm sorry, were you
no, I
gonna
was gonna say, which is to say, like we're all about getting flued out, as they say. Like, you know, Kansas is doing it. Anybody else who would like to like engage us on private screenings with their community, we're all about that. We'll make space for that as well as we're doing everything else.
in terms of doing the story circles, how can people support you in your being able to do as many story circles as you would like?
Well, story circles is just the technology that, you know, shouts out to John O'Neill and the Free Southern Theater. They're the ones who kind of innovated that and passed it on to us generation after generation. Once you know how to do it, you can do it amongst, you know, yourself with your people. I try to do that with, you know, my students, even just like, you know, different places I've implemented. I do it with workshops with adults when I do my curriculum, for example, that I also try to get inside of schools. Those are not exclusive to this movie or exclusive to us, but if you wanted a training on it, I could definitely facilitate something like that online. Or again, if we were to come to you in person, that's something that I could curate with the people present. So yeah, the story circles can be done wherever people know how to do it. It's a question of what your purpose is and what your objective is. Like for this one, we wanted to make art out of it. Almost always I use it to make art, but you might use it for whatever means. It could be for organizing and for action, what have you, or just a part of the education, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So your interest is in basically training people to be able to do the story circles themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, my primary interest is, how did they connect with this film? Most specifically, like we were just trying to get that out to the people and to the world, and to create like connectivity through different organizing by way of the film, because there's all these different metrics of organizing that are touched on in it and different issues. So if that helped create like connections between organizers around the country because they all wanted to talk about one of those issues, or because they were all organizing on different facets and they saw the intersectionality coming through this kind of narrative, then that's interesting to me too. That's I want it to be much bigger than, I'd have capacity to serve. I wanted to inspire other people to kind of create their own lanes with it. Story Circle is probably the most accessible tool that you can use. But like I said, we use like a 4-prong strategy. There was the poetry piece, there was movement, theater to press, which is not, again, my creation. That's Augusto Boal. It's way deeper than what I did. I did like one snippet. And they're experts on that. I am not one. That can facilitate that for you. There's also the political education component. So all of those things are tools that a community can use, not just Story Circle, but Story Circle and poetry would be the ones I'm best at teaching.
If I can go back to the question about the story circle and what the folks got out of it, what I assume they got out of it is they learned how to listen to one another, which I feel like this film is, that might be like the underlying conceit of it, is listen to what we're saying. We've been saying this for years, we being the communities that were portrayed in the film. So hopefully they went away with that they could listen in a different way and be able to empathize with the person that's across from them in a more meaningful and actionable way.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you're making the film, and also having this conversation. Following this workshop, we have one more workshop for people to attend. And you will also receive an email with resources from this conversation, and that email will have the link to evaluate the workshop as well. So I want to say thank you once again, and this concludes our presentation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.